Hey, how's it going today, folks? It is Saturday, June 13th. It's running right along about 2-3 o'clock in the afternoon here. We're going to do a little bit of crop scouting today. I've got some time here. Today and tomorrow hit and miss, so I'm probably going to take me a couple days to do this hit and miss. We're going to be looking at alfalfa, corn, and our wheat. This field of alfalfa right here, we ended up harvesting on June 26th. So we're a little bit out yet before we need to cut this. We're going to walk through. We're going to make sure we don't have any leaf hoppers or anything like that, bug damage or anything. We did spray here a little while ago for that to prevent that, so I'm hoping we don't see any bugs. But the first cornfield that we're going to walk into is right over to our left here. This corn was planted on June 4th, so we're just at about 37 or 8 days, 39 days or something like that. We've got a decent stand of corn. This cornfield was the field that we started using the spiked closing wheels, if you remember that video back about a month ago or so. We started with this field here. I planted this field with a closing wheel, a spiked closing wheel on one side, and we left the rubber closing wheel on the other. And then it rained. It rained before I got these two strips done here, and then me and Jason ended up putting the other spiked wheel on the other side, and we just went after it here. So we're going to walk through the corn here first, and you really don't notice any difference between. We had a couple of rows. I believe it was row 13 and 14 had the doubles on there, which is right here. 13 and 14 had the double wheel, and 11 and 12, these rows here, they had the rubber closing wheel on, and then the other rows had just a single 1 and 1. I don't really see a difference in 13th and the 14th row here compared to 15 and 16. I do see a little bit of a difference in row 11 and 12 compared to 13 and 14, but we're running in a little bit of a wet area here. This corn is just a little bit over knee high. So I don't know as if I could say that the closing wheels helped us or hurt us. They definitely didn't hurt us at all, but maybe you could say, I can't even say there's a difference at all. So it's a little bit wet right here where we walk through, so the corn is a little yellow, but other than that, we've got a decent stand of corn here for as late as it was planted. It's all filled out pretty good throughout the field here. Now we're going to walk over here to where I had that closing wheel frame chained up. So that day I was screwing around with the closing wheels. I ended up pulling that one closing wheel frame up out of the way to kind of show you what the trench looks like that the corn planter leaves when you don't have closing wheels working correctly. And this was the row right here. So you can see the corn is not as good in these two rows. We got a little bit of a skip here. I wasn't going that fast from the start to the stop here behind me, but we've got definitely corn that didn't do too good in this row here, just because it was not covered up at all. There was no closing wheel working there at all. And the only reason why we might have anything growing here is because I see a tire track there, so that could be the reason why there's corn growing, is because I drove over the top of it. So that's what you run into. So we're gonna check some alfalfa here now, and then we'll move on to some no-till corn that we had put in. Alright, now I'm standing out in the alfalfa field. This field was harvested on 26th of June. So we are 4 and 13. We're 17 days in. Since we harvested this, we've got another 13 days or so to go. Now there is some blue flowering action. I see some there. Usually that's a strong indication that the alfalfa plant has come to full maturity here. This particular variety of alfalfa that we have planted in this field I seeded a year ago in the spring, and this is a Cropland Harv Extra. Now we're just going to sweep this quick. I don't pretend to know really what I'm doing here. We're just going to be looking for a few bugs in this net. We usually have a couple of guys scouting this kind of stuff for us, and I've got a little bit of time here today to just kind of take a look at things and see what I see for myself. But there's weevil that bothers the alfalfa. We've got leaf hoppers and aphids, of course, and we have sprayed for those bugs, and we usually try to keep a good management level on our alfalfa fields. Not that we're perfect at it, but we try to keep ahead of it. Sometimes we get caught, but we're just going to walk through this quick and check for some bugs. Okay, I've got a net here that Michael gave me from Auburn Ag, and I ended up putting a little bit of a ruler on here so that I can just stick the ground and measure this, and I'm getting 18 inches there. I've got as much as 22 inches out here, which is decent for how it's only been growing for a couple weeks. So I guess what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to take 10 sweeps back and forth with the net. I'm going to run through, I'm going to grab, I'm just going to sweep it once, grab 10 sweeps, and then we'll see what there is in the net here for any type of critters. Okay, so we have a few bugs flying around in here. Not a whole hell of a lot. Nothing more than what you'd normally see. We've got the different bugs here. We've got just regular leaf hoppers. There's a ladybug of some sort, but there's nothing really in here to be concerned about yet, but we're going to have to keep an eye on it. Now we've got two options here. If we run into a situation where we start to notice more bugs, we can either spray for the bugs, or we can come in and cut it quick. Now what we don't want to have happen is to have these bugs come in and just devour all of the leaves here, because they'll come in and eat up these leaves, and they can potentially make the alfalfa a little sickly too. So not only do you lose the protein in the leaves of that cutting of alfalfa, but it also can kind of stunt your next cutting. So we're going to move along to the next field now. Alright, now we're going to show you the good, we're going to show you the bad, we're going to show you the ugly, we're going to show you the excellent. This is somewhat of the bad. This field here was the first no-till field that we did with the spiked closing wheel. For the most part, about everything that was planted came up. Not all of it, but for the most part it came up. Now this was planted under extremely wet conditions. This is second year corn here. This was no-tilled last year as well. Again, not a perfect year. Out come the excuses. And It's just we're dealing with the hand that we were dealt. This corn lacks a little nitrogen. We got real small stalks there, and we got to get on this as far as applying nitrogen. We know that, but we'll have to keep an eye on this. This was planted the 6th of June, I believe it was. So again, this was planted in extremely wet conditions. We've got a wet hole right here that I had to lift up to go through. Well, no, I didn't lift up when I went through it, but I partially lifted up. But at any rate, this is wet right here. Down in there, we had trouble getting the combine up that headland. So we're going to move on to the next field. We got to keep this video kind of short here, but this here isn't bad considering, I suppose. So let's move on to the next field here. Alright, we are walking through another field. This is no-till as well. This was planted on June 9th with the spiked closing wheels. And this is first year corn here. Now we're going to be walking over into the spot that Andrew was planting here. So he planted from here over. So we've got the outside time around the field, and then he is planted here now. Some people had commented that how hard could it be, but look how straight his ends are. His starts and his stops here. No curly Q rows there anywhere. So this corn's not doing too bad. Needs a little bit of nitrogen. It's shriveling up a little bit. Needs water as well. But it's not doing too bad for planted on June 9th in a no-till environment. Let's get some groceries on this, and we ought to be doing pretty good. So the next field that we're going to go into is the stuff that we planted first. So we're just kind of moving along as we go here. So we'll be back at you in a minute. Alright, we are in the field that we planted first this year. This is not quite chest high. This is a PO 1449 Pioneer BMR silage corn. We've got a decent stand in here. It's not too awful bad. We're going to dig up, we're going to take a corn plant out of this field, and we're going to compare it to some of the other ones. Again, this field was planted first on May 18th, and this field here we had just regular closing wheels done in a conventional till environment. Soil conditions were perfect when this was planted, so we're just going to dig up a corn plant here, set that in the back of my truck, and then we're going to move on to some other fields here. We're going to look at some wheat that we have planted on this farm. We're going to run into the field that we had planted second, and then we're going to move on to another farm. So I'm going to have Junior, I don't know, you want to dig it out? You got to dig out a ways so you don't grab any roots. So here, why don't you hold the camera? Alright, we ended up grabbing two corn stalks from this field, and we've got some pretty good roots started on both of these corn stalks. We're not going to pretend to even know what we're actually looking at, other than we're looking at some pretty good healthy plants here. I'm going to show you these a little bit. We're going to put them up in the front of the truck here, and we're going to move on. Got some pretty good root health here. This is in conventional tilled ground, you know, in other words, it's work ground, chisel plowed disc, and then planted. This corn was planted just about 2 months ago, 8 weeks ago. Alright, we're walking through a field of wheat here. This is 40 acres in here. We're going to do hay next week. So this is a ways out. It's close. I'm thinking 10 days or so this will probably be ready to roll. It's not quite tipped yet, but looks like we'll have a fair amount of straw in here. We're going to fly the drone here in a little while. I've got some cornfields on this same farm that we're going to fly the drone on at the same time here. So we'll throw it up here in a minute. Okay, we have just lifted off, and we're going to fly over the top of this 40-acre wheat field. This looks like a pretty good stand of wheat. We got some birds flying around here. We're just going to fly out to about the middle. We've got, this is some stony ground over in here, and over by the wood line here, we've got some spots where the stone is right up close and tight to the top of the ground here. And well, there the spot is, right there. And we just lift the planter up over the top of these spots and move on to the next area. You can kind of see the rock is right close to the ground here. So when we applied nitrogen early on in, it was the end of April, we didn't leave any tracks because the wheat was small enough. The beauty with these 120-foot boom sprayers is they can run in their same track, and although we did run 3 applications across it, the first application that we ran ourselves, we didn't leave any tracks. When they came in with the sprayer, they ended up driving the same track when they applied it the second time around. So this here is the field that we planted second. Again, we didn't end up applying any fertilizer near the row. The only fertilizer that we have put on was about 3 to 4 gallons of product in furrow here. We had a problem with the 2x2. We were plugging up the strainer. We ended up, after we got this farm planted, we ended up flushing the system out at home here. So we're just kind of flying through here. This looks pretty decent. This is real good ground that we have planted this crop into. So what we're going to end up doing is we're going to end up top dressing this, side dressing this rather, here in the next week or so. We ended up flying an airplane, had an airplane that flew over this corn, and they did imagery maps, and they're going to apply nitrogen accordingly to the crop as needed. So we're going to have this done here in the next week or so. So again, this was the field that was planted second on the 18th of May here. So we're going to fly the drone back to the truck here. We're going to move on to the next field. Thought I'd just throw the drone up in the air to kind of give you a bird's eye view from the top of the corn. I should have walked out into this corn a while ago. You know, you wouldn't be able to see much had we walked out into it with a camera. So I'm getting low on battery, so we're gonna get her back to the truck. I'm parked on the end of this field, and it's pretty windy, and the drone does a heck of a job, boy. Yeah. Alright, so I've just showed up to the farm that's the furthest away from our farm, and I'm in a 70-acre field of wheat here now. This wheat is a little farther along than the previous field of wheat that we were in. Typically, when we plant wheat, we chop the corn off and then we plant the wheat afterwards, and then it's usually on the ground that we plan on seeding down. That's what we plan on doing to this field of wheat here. We plan on harvesting it, applying a little bit of manure maybe. This is 17 miles away from our farm, so it's a little bit up in the air whether or not we're gonna get manure on this. But as you can see, this is a little farther along than the other field of wheat that we were in a little bit ago here. There's a little bit of a green tinge to it, which is fine. I'd rather it be a little late anyways, because we've got second cutting that's going to take us a week to do, and we're not going to be done with second cutting until 2 weeks from right now. So I suspect that this needs all of 2 weeks to mature out here. But across the road from this field, I have a field that I no-tilled corn into. It was a sod piece. It was actually my first piece of no-till that I did this year. We're going to take a peek at that, and we're going to throw the drone up in the air again. We're going to fly this field here. We're going to fly the no-till field to give you an idea what the no-till looks like. Those conditions were absolutely perfect when I did the no-till there, but I had not had my spiked wheels on the planter yet. So we're going to jump out of here. We're going to run over there and take a look at the no-till piece of corn. Alright, this field here was the first field that we no-tilled this year, and I no-tilled it actually without any spike tooth wheels. It was just regular closing wheels, and this is in pretty good shape. This was planted into sod, and the conditions were absolutely perfect. We're going to get the drone up here in a little bit, and we're going to fly this field. This is a Northrop King 0581, I believe was the variety, and this was planted on June 1st, and I had ordered the closing wheel, the spike tooth closing wheels for the planter about 4 days before I actually planted this field. I was ready to plant this, and I was disappointed that I didn't have those closing wheels, but just making my first pass, everything was working out so good that I continued to plant it without them. This is a 105-day maturity on this corn here, and we're going to take this corn as silage. Again, this is 105-day, planted on June 1st. So we're gonna dig up a couple of these plants in this field here, and then we're gonna throw the drone up in the air, and we're gonna fly this field and the wheat field across the road from it here, and then we're gonna move on. Okay, we are going to fly across the field, the first field that we did no-till corn on here. And I planted this on the 1st of June. It's a Northrop King. I believe it's an 0518 or 0519. It's 105-day relative maturity corn. Explained it earlier in the last part of the last part of the video there that yes, So this is a 105 day. I ordered the spiked wheels 4 days prior to planting this field, and I thought I would have had the wheels by the time I planted this, but I did not, and I ended up using the regular rubber style closing wheels on this field. And we're flying crossways of this field right now. We're gonna chop this field for silage. This is first year corn, no-tilled into sod. We're gonna jump over across the road here. We've got a field of wheat, a 70-acre field of wheat. This is a 30-acre field of corn right here, and we're gonna jump over into this field of wheat, and then we're gonna kind of circle around into a field that I planted. It was a field that was chisel plowed and disked, and we ended up planting that just before we planted this field here. So this is a 70-acre field of wheat here that we're gonna combine here in the next couple 2-3 weeks. There's a little bit of a green tinge to it, which is okay. We've got second cut and hay that we want to do here next week, and we're going to need a little bit of time before we can sneak into this anyways. We've got some sprayer tracks here and there, but other than that, you can see the wind kind of blowing across the wheat here a little bit. So we're going to jump back across the road. We're going to fly the length of this field here, and we just took off about where this old barn is right here, and we're going to jump into a field of corn that we planted just prior to the no-till corn on the other side of the road here. And this other field of corn here was the field was chisel plowed, disked, and planted the day before this no-till field was planted. And we got to get up above the top of these trees here. And this field here was corn after wheat stubble. This was wheat last year. There's my truck right. There's where we're at in the truck right there. So this was wheat here last year, and it was corn. It's obviously corn right now, and it lays a little wet down in here in the bottom, but other than that, you really can't tell the difference between this corn here and the corn next to it that was no-tilled. It's pretty, where it's healthy, it's just as healthy as the corn that's on the other side of the hedgerow that is no-tilled. So we're gonna fly across this conventional tilled piece. We're gonna zoom out behind the back of my truck here, between my truck and the log loading truck here. We're going to zoom back across the no-till field, and then we're going to move on to the next field. We're going from the conventional tilled right here into no-till. You really can't tell the difference. So, and there's a pretty good idea of what that looks like. So we're just going to circle back around, land the drone quickly behind my truck, box it up, and we're going to move on out of here. We've got one more field of corn to check in this area, and then that was no-till after I actually no-tilled it after this piece of corn here, and then we're going to check some soybeans.
Landing.
Alright, we are in another field of no-till. This was planted in extremely wet conditions with the regular closing wheels, and I didn't like the conditions when I pulled into this field, but I had let the plows go out of the area, and I just ended up planting it. This is only about 4 acres in here. We're not doing too bad. There's some spots there where it was real wet that didn't come up that great. We got some spots on the headlands here that's a little thin. It's thin up where my truck is parked, but you can see the trench is still somewhat open here, just by walking past this corn here. I mean, this was spongy, wet sod that we had sprayed Roundup on and then planted it. Ideally, it would have been better to have had the spiked toothed closing wheels. We're going to grab we're going to dig up a couple of plants out of this field, and then we're going to move along. We're going to look at some soybeans after this. We haven't grown soybeans before. So we're going to take a peek at the soybeans, and then I've got one field of alfalfa that we've got some test plots done on, and then that's going to do it for this video. So we're going to dig up a couple of plants, look at some soybeans, and another piece of alfalfa. Okay, I've got 2 plants that I just dug up out of this poorer field. Now, this was planted the same day as this was. It's just a little shorter in height off of the sample pieces, although the sample pieces don't look much different from each other, but just looking across that field, you can see that the conditions are quite a bit poorer here than the other field. The other field was almost perfect. So we've got 3 different samples here. We've got conventional tilled ground planted on May 18th. We've got no-till planted on June 1st and excellent conditions, and no-till planted on June 1st, poor conditions. We've got about the same root health here on the 2 samples of corn from the no-till. But we've got some healthier roots here from the corn that was planted on the 18th of May, 2 weeks prior to these samples. However, this has had a couple weeks to get ahead of this stuff here. So we got a little girthier stalk here off of the better field than we do off of the poorer field. Little taller stand here. Slightly better stalk here on this one sample that we grabbed from the conventional till, and obviously quite a bit more girth here than that there. But we're going to move along to the soybean field now. Alright, we are standing in a field of alfalfa right now. This was harvested, or chopped rather, on the 12th of June. It needs to come out now. It's starting to turn blue a little bit, and it is running right at it's like 29 to 30 inches tall. We're just going to sweep this for bugs here quick. We need to cut this, but we've got the rest of our alfalfa that's running a little later, and we can harvest all of our alfalfa in about 6 days. So we got to try to meet it in the middle. This is a Harv Extra alfalfa. It will last a little longer. It will extend itself out a little bit as far as protein and whatnot like that goes. So we can get away with harvesting this a little later and not lose too much protein. This was new seeded. This was seeded new last spring, so this is the first year of this. So we're gonna sweep this for bugs quick, and then we're gonna move on to the next field. Alright, I swept this just one time, 10 sweeps here, and we're not getting, well, we got some ladybugs, which are good. Ladybugs are going to eat out anything, any problems that we have, but we've got, well, nothing. Just a couple of ladybugs. So we're doing pretty good there. We did have this sprayed for bugs here about 10 days ago, so we should be in pretty good shape. This is a real good stand of alfalfa here. It's real clean. There isn't any weeds in this at all. This is pretty thick alfalfa here. Pull a couple of these plants out, and we've got quite a bit of leaves here. It's pretty good stuff. So yeah, leaves all the way right down to the bottom. We've got some healthy stuff there. So, well, with that being said, we're gonna move on here. So, you ready, Junior? Got your bug net. Throw that up in the back. All right, we're gonna move on to the next field. All right, we're walking through the first field of beans that we've planted this year. We've got some broadleafs coming up in them. They need to be sprayed here. These we ended up planting with the grain drill, so they're planted on 7.5-inch centers. This was planted June 4th, I believe. They look pretty good. We've got to get in here. We've got some broadleafs coming up. We've got to get in here and spray these yet. But I think they're doing relatively good compared to the year that we've had. They seem to be pretty thick here. Again, this is our first year growing beans this year, so we put in about 140 acres or so. We need to keep an eye on these a little bit and spray them accordingly. I don't know if we need to worry about it right off. Maybe we need to let them get a little bigger here, but they seem to be rather thick. These were planted at 170,000 plants per acre, seeds per acre, what have you, and it looks pretty good for what they are. So we're going to move along. We've got one more field to check. We've got a field of alfalfa to check, and then that's going to about wrap it up for this video. So this field here is about 25 acres, and the rest of the beans of ours are on strips, and they look the same. So we'll move along to the alfalfa field that we have, and then that's going to close out the video here. Alright, this is the last field that we're going to scout here for this video. This is alfalfa that we had seeded down in August of 2017. This is an Aphatron alfalfa. This was harvested, the first cutting was harvested off of this the 12th of June, and it's ready to be cut right now. And this is running right at 32 inches. So this is 32 inches tall. This is a pretty good stand of alfalfa in here. We're going to sweep this quick for bugs. Make sure we don't have any activity going on. We do have it starting to go down right here. This is starting to lay down a little bit. We've got some blue flowers going on, so that's a clear indication that your alfalfa is ready to be cut. So let's sweep this quick, and we'll get on out of here. Alright, there doesn't seem to be any bug pressure in here either. I mean, I've got like nothing. So well folks, we didn't get any insects when we swept this field either. That tells us that the insecticide that we put on a couple weeks ago actually worked, and it held on to do what it was supposed to do. So I want to thank you for watching this little bit of a crop scouting video here, and we'll catch you at the next one. If this was something that you liked, remember to hit the thumbs up and hit the subscribe button if you haven't yet. Subscribe to the channel, and we'll catch you at the next video. Thanks again for watching, folks.